Senator from Alaska.
Are we in a quorum call?
Yes, we are.
As unanimous consent that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Mr. President, today I rise to note some good news about the state of our American economy. Hard work clearly remains. We're still recovering from the deepest slump since the Great Depression. But I think it's time to appreciate our recent progress. Over the past few days and weeks, there have been plenty of positive economic news. Listen to some of these headlines. From the New York Times, jobless rate dips to the lowest level in more than 2 years. From CNN, Dow closes with the largest gain since March 2009. From Reuters, private sector jobs soar, payroll forecasts rise. From the Wall Street Journal, online sales reach record $1.25 billion on Cyber Monday. I know it's far too early to claim and start to celebrate, but I want to tell you a little bit about some of the details of this news. And I know back in my state in Alaska, just like everywhere else in this country, people are still struggling to balance the checkbooks. They face tough decisions about the cost of groceries, basic health care, college tuition for their kids, and just the basic expenses to live. Yet the recent news about our economy is very encouraging. And I want to give those specific examples. On the unemployment and jobs, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says total payrolls increased by 120,000 jobs in November, as the unemployment rate dropped to 8.6%. As the headline said, it's the lowest level in more than 2 years. And also, the latest news also marks 21 consecutive months of private sector job growth. I know some will come down and claim, well, that's not good enough. Well, I remember when I first came here, prior to me serving in the Senate, we were averaging about 500,000 jobs being lost every month. And let me repeat this one statistic, 21 consecutive months of private sector job growth, not led by government job growth, but private sector job growth. Important distinction and important statistic. So it's not robust, but it is growing. Again, positive news. On manufacturing, manufacturing activity climbed in November. According to the Institute of Supply Management, its indicators tell us manufacturing is continuing to expand. Another strong signal of overall economic growth. The American automotive industry is coming back strong. And think about it again. In 2009, the beginning, it was literally flat on its back, trying to recover. In November this year, light vehicle sales were up 11.4% compared to a year ago. That's the highest sales rate since 2009. And I'll note that that's when we put in the program right after that, Cash for Clunkers program, which many of us in this chamber supported. There is more good news about the automobile industry. Ford says its November sales rose 13%. Chrysler Group reported a breathtaking November sales jump of 44.5% from a year ago. And General Motors reported it sold 7% more new cars and trucks in November than it did a year earlier. On investments in the markets, again, a signal that's important. It's not something you should just judge the economy always by, but it's an important piece of the economy. And what I mean by that is so much of middle-class America is tied to the market. May it be their 529 account for their kids' education, or their 401k retirement program, or their own personal management of their account, or if you're self-employed, your SEP account. We're all tied to it to some degree. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed over 12,000 last Friday, a gain of 7% just in 1 week. And let me take a moment to kind of describe where we've come from in the market. Last week's closing numbers represent a gain of about 33% since January 2009. when several of us members just came into the Senate. But as you know, in 2009, January, the market still kept going down. In March 2009, it dropped to its lowest level, a little over 6,600. Last week's numbers represent a whopping 81% increase since 2009. And, you know, if you take the next step and you look at the S&P index, the Standard & Poor's 500 index reflects a very similar gain, up 36% since 2009, and since the dark days of March when it really crashed out, 82% increase. It's important because so much, again, of our retirements are tied to education, as I mentioned, to see the market move up. If you read or hear the pundits or the politicos around here, you know, it's always doom and gloom. And, you know, I wanted to come down to the floor just to talk about some of these issues because we are moving in the right track. We are moving in a positive way. But we don't hear this news because good news is never necessarily reported. It may show up one day and then disappear. Then when one bad thing happens, we hear about that for a week and a half, and then we're down here tussling back and forth about why it's so bad. But the overall numbers tell us the fundamentals are changing in a positive way. The other piece, which is consumer confidence, which is important because if the consumer isn't confident about the future, then they're not going to invest or spend or participate in this economy. But it is better. Last month, the Consumer Board's Consumer Confidence Index rose to 56.0%, the highest level since July. Americans spent $52.4 billion over four-day Thanksgiving weekend. According to the National Retail Federation, that's the highest total ever recorded during the traditional start of the holiday shopping season. When I was back home for Thanksgiving, I heard this good news from many shop owners that I visited. The new Apple store in Anchorage saw record sales, thousands of shoppers coming through the door, and I will tell you, during Thanksgiving weekend, it was a cold weekend. And sales on Cyber Monday, the first online shopping day after Thanksgiving weekend, rose 22% from a year ago. Americans spent another record, $1.25 billion on that Monday, setting again the record sales for Cyber Monday. On trade, the trade deficit narrowed, not where we want it to be, but better, from $44.9 billion in August to $43.1 billion in September. That's the smallest trade gap since the last December and the biggest one-month improvement since July, according to the Commerce Department. On housing, which is a critical piece of our overall economy, some say it's why we're in the recession because the housing market collapsed totally. I think the housing had a huge impact, but there's many other pieces to the equation. But we never hear good news on the housing front. We always hear, again, the negative news. And there's still a lot of work here to get new home starts, get some of the current inventory off the market, help many people who are underwater, who are staying in their homes, to make sure they can continue to stay in their homes and receive the benefit. Pending home sales index. This is a forward-looking index based on contracts that people are signing. People who are now looking at a home to purchase and maybe entered into their contract and signed and said, I'll be purchasing this home 30 days, 60 days, 90 days from now. Was up 10.4% in October from the month before. And the National Association of Realtors say home sales are up more than 9% from the same time last year. Again, is it as robust as we want? No. Is it better than where it was? Absolutely. And it's because many of the policies that myself and my colleagues and you, Mr. President, have fought for on the floor here. Lots of times we make these decisions and then we move on and we go to the next issue and we don't have time to reflect on the results of the work we're doing. And in the last 2.5 years, since the Great Recession came into play, there's a lot of good stuff happening. As for the residential construction, this is, again, people building homes, providing construction jobs, providing new tax base for communities around this country that need it so they can hire the police and firefighters and teachers that need to protect these homes in their communities. The Census Bureau says it was at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of $239 billion in October, up roughly 3.5% from the previous month. And for my own home state in Alaska, again, spending time back home, I try to spend time with the small business community, asking them how's it going, what's happening, what do you sense, what's your confidence level. In a meeting I had recently with a group of small business owners, one got a loan just very recently from the SBA, the Small Business Administration. Took advantage of the low cost that we were able to implement through legislation that we passed right here. It helped him get into the restaurant. Now employs 120 people in my community in Alaska, Anchorage. Another owner of a video production company has had one of the best years ever, doing work for corporate clients willing to spend money. And finally, Mr. President, all of these are very positive developments. And now, as we approach the end of the year, we're in this chamber, we need to do our part to keep this momentum moving forward. I know people watch us and we're squabbling off and on over the issues. As I mentioned, all this good news is because of the work that a slim majority did over the last 3 years in this body, because we believed in the future. We believed in what the potential is of this great country we live in. And some maybe had different views of what could happen. But we believed in what's possible. And these statistics show us that belief is now paying off. As I looked at where we are today, we need to continue to make these smart public policy decisions that create a sound economy. And we need to do it as best we can in a bipartisan way. What I'm talking about right now is, of course, extending the tax cut for middle-class American families, continuing the tax relief, giving a reduction in our payroll taxes, which is due to expire at the end of this year. Before any of us leave Washington later this month for the holidays, we clearly have to resolve this issue. In my opinion, we have no choice, and here's why. Unless Congress takes action, the average middle-class family will be hit by a $1,000 tax increase starting January 1. Economists of all political stripes have called this tax cut critical for America's continued economic growth. They say letting it lapse could push us back into a deep recession. And truly that would be unforgivable based on where we are today and how far we have come in a short time of 2.5, almost 3 years now. But some on the other side of the political aisle seem unsure about renewing the tax relief, the tax cut aimed at middle-class families and small businesses. This after fighting for massive tax cuts for the wealthy in our deficit reduction talks. If they block this tax cut, about 160 million families will get the news during the holidays that their taxes are going up January 1st. That's simply not fair. And it makes no sense just when the economic indicators I mentioned a moment ago are looking so positive. As they said, if we don't act, a typical family making $50,000 a year would see their taxes increase by $1,000. But if we pass the middle class tax cut in 2011 for the 2012 beginning tax year, that same family would get a total tax cut of $1,500. Not only would they see the $1,000, but they'd get an additional because of the way we've crafted this. Most of the money goes directly to the economy. In Alaska, roughly 400,000 people benefit from the tax cut this year, and it's used and it pumped into our economy $300 million into our economy, which I know, again, the many small businesses, that I was, matter of fact, traveling through a couple of them with my son and his friend, or his son and his cousin, House of Hobbies and Bosco store. While they were playing all the games for free, playing the race cars and all that stuff and looking at which baseball card they need to get at Bosco's, I was asking the clerks, what was it like? What did it feel like? There's no question they sense there is a change in the economy in the positive. That's because in Alaska, for example, these 400,000 people have $300 million in their pockets. Not here down with the IRS taking it and putting it into the Treasury, but they had it. They spent it. I will tell you, and I'll be frank about it, yes, after my son and my nephew, his cousin, spent that time on the free road there playing with toys, I ended up spending some of that money also to help my small businesses there in the economy. But that's what it's about. Nationally, this tax cut puts $110 billion into the American economy. And let me say that again and underline that for people. $110 billion. Money that could go to the IRS or go to middle-class Americans. I think the choice is very clear. Who should benefit from those dollars? You know, we were elected here, as I was, elected from Alaska to represent Alaska and all Americans, not just those at the top end, but the people who work every day, the people we see, Mr. President, on a regular basis when we go back home or when we walk out of this building or actually in this building, as you know, the cafeterias, the people that are spending their time every single day working hard to move this economy forward. It is our obligation to continue to do what we can to make their lives a little bit better by lessening their burden of taxes and giving them the relief, the tax relief that they deserve and that we should be able to give to them as January 1 rolls around. Mr. President, again, thank you for the time. I hope as we move toward the holiday season here that we can continue to give the gift of tax relief to middle-class Americans, to my 400,000 folks back in Alaska who have benefited from this, and all the small businesses in Alaska that have benefited from this. Let's do the right thing, do it in a bipartisan way, and let's move forward to giving continued tax relief to middle-class Americans. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. I would ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I would ask that I be allowed to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Madam President, I understand the President made another speech today, and the speeches that he's been giving lately are clever political documents, and it's pretty clear that his focus has shifted from governing now over a year from the about a year from the election day to campaigning. But really our nation is in a serious financial condition. Our debt is larger than we like to acknowledge that it is. Our European friends on the other side of the Atlantic are wrestling with their debt problems, and many of those nations, most of those nations, have debt less than we do as a percentage of our GDP. And we know from every expert that we've heard on the Budget Committee, where I serve as ranking member, we must change our path. We are on an unsustainable path, and we cannot continue on that path. And time after time, we've had hearings and we've heard experts and we've heard them on television and talking heads tell us we've got to get our debt situation altered. We've got to get on a sound path. Perhaps a tougher path for a few years, a harder road, but the right road. The road that will lead to soundness in our economy, prosperity and growth. That's what we need. Now, the Debt Commission that President Obama appointed, headed by Mr. Erskine Bowles and Senator Alan Simpson, they told us we're on the most predictable path to a financial crisis the nation has ever been on. And what they were saying was the unsustainable debt, as they called it, trajectory of this country will lead us to some sort of economic catastrophe. Knock us back into a recession, put us back like 2007, 2008, or like what Europe is facing right now. They pleaded with us to do something about it. And the Debt Commission, laid out a plan. I don't agree with everything in the plan, but it said at a minimum, bipartisan agreement was achieved on this, the debt should be reduced, the added debt that we would incur over the next 10 years should be reduced by at least $4 trillion. That we should reduce the growth of our debt by at least $4 trillion. So in the last two meetings in the Budget Control Act, it looks like we achieved about $2.1 trillion, not the 4. But they all said we needed more than that. And because the increase in our debt over the next 10 years would be about $10 trillion, $8 trillion. That's the increase on top of the $15 trillion we've already incurred. This past year, September 30th, ended it. We will have added $1.23 trillion to our debt. The year before that, 1.3. The year before that, 1.2 trillion. Only three times in history we've had deficits over $1 trillion. So it's a very serious situation that we're in. And so we have a speech. And I just would have to say we try to look at the speech and see what it is that the President has proposed. He is our leader, our commander-in-chief. You only have one chief executive, one governor, one mayor. See Senator Manchin here, he was a governor. He had to answer to his people and manage a state and the leadership. So what is it this executive, our president, is proposing that we do? Well, it's pretty clear that it appears that he's proposing that we spend next year $324 billion more than we plan to spend. He calls it a tax cut, or maintaining a tax cut. In truth, it's a holiday from paying into our Social Security fund, our Social Security pension that all Americans pay into as they work. It's a holiday on that. Well, where does the money come from? So you've got a trust fund. The Social Security we pay into it, and we've got a promised benefit when we retire, and we want to honor that and make sure the Social Security Trust Fund is able to honor that. How do we not pay into it without hurting, damaging severely the Social Security Trust Fund? Well, they say, don't worry, we'll put the money in. Who is we? Well, we as the United States Treasury. The United States Treasury will put the money in. But the United States Treasury is running a actually projected before the year, projected earlier by the Congressional Budget Office to run a $1.0 trillion deficit this year, a little bit better than the $1.23 trillion deficit we ran last year. So we're running a $1 trillion deficit. We don't have any money in the Treasury to pay to Social Security. So how do we honor the Social Security Trust Fund? How do we put the money in? Well, we give bonds. Just an IOU. The United States Treasury, easy as pie, signs a little document, an IOU, gives it to Social Security and say, you're made whole. Don't worry. No problem. What me worry? We got it under control. Well, where does this come from? Social Security is heading in a trajectory that is going to call this debt. The trustees are going to need this money to pay our beneficiaries. And they're going to call their debt to the United States Treasury, and the Treasury is going to have to pay it, in my opinion, unless we totally abandon our responsibility to the seniors in America, and I don't think we will. So we're going to pay that money, and it added to the debt. This year that we're in, under the President's plan, beginning in January, it will add $324 billion in debt. Now, see what the Deficit Commission, the Bowles-Simpson Commission, was all about, was laying out a plan to reduce our debt, not increase the debt. The first thing we have to do to confront a surging debt in America is to quit digging the hole deeper. Quit asserting new programs to spend larger and larger amounts of money. And then if you look at the, and it would also add $155 billion the second year. So it would total $479 billion. They say, well, we've got the Treasury figured out. We'll have a tax increase, and we'll raise taxes, and that will, over 10 years, pay for the $479 billion that's added to our debt right now. There'll be enough money coming in, don't worry, over the 10 years from this new tax. So I would just say a couple of things about that. Well, if we're going to raise taxes, what the Bipartisan Debt Commission told us was, use it to pay down debt. Don't use it to fund a new spending program of $479 billion. If you're going to cut spending somewhere in the program to save money, let's begin to reduce our debt. Don't just cut spending so we can create a new spending program. We really have got to watch what we're doing. And I don't believe that it has been thought through carefully where we're heading. And I don't see anything in this speech today that would lay out a 2-, 5-, 10-year plan for making America a stronger and better place. But we're told that the President cares about the middle class. And if you question any of these schemes, then you don't care about working Americans. And I reject that. That's offensive to me. I totally believe I represent the cross-section of people of my state and America. I love and respect the working people of this country, and they are entitled to better. They're entitled to leadership that tells them the truth. And the truth is, we are endangering their future and their children's future by allowing the most incredible debt increases the nation has ever seen. And that has got to be brought under control. And it's offensive to suggest that if you have a different view about how to create jobs and wealth in America, you don't care about the people who make America great. People who go to work every day, who send their children to defend this country, who pay their taxes and who obey the law and do the things right and support those who are in trouble and need help. So I would just propose this more specifically, and I think the Republican plan touches these very issues in an effective way that would in fact increase and enhance job creation and economic growth in America. First, we need policies that reduce the cost of energy for Americans. We've got an Energy Department, an Interior Department that seems to believe its goals in life should be to drive up the cost of energy. Make coal, make natural gas harder to produce, make oil more hard to produce, make us have to buy it from abroad when we could produce more at home, creating jobs in this country, creating wealth in this country, creating taxpayers in this country. We need more American energy. We need more energy at lower prices. The idea that some have that we're going to be better off because of carbon or other issues to have higher energy prices so we use less of it is totally unjustified, and it's creating an incredible burden on working Americans. We need to end the health care proposal that is clearly driving up health care costs. It's causing businesses not to hire. I've talked to them, small businesses in my state. They assure me with absolute confidence that the health care bill that will be taking effect and beginning to take effect will cause them to hire fewer people. We need more people hired. We need more people working. We need to eliminate unnecessary, counterproductive governmental regulations that drive up the cost of our products, making them less competitive in the world marketplace. We need to do that. Won't cost the Treasury any money, but it'll make America more productive and create jobs. I supported and worked with my Democratic colleagues, and we passed in this Senate. But the President didn't support it, legislation to demand that China treat its currency in a fair way, to eliminate the currency manipulation that they've been participating in, and to eliminate the unfair hammering, savaging of American industry that's occurring in this country as a result of unfair trade. That's very real. It's got to end. And the President needs to be leading on that. And he would create jobs in our country without adding to our debt. And finally, the greatest threat to our economic growth and to our job creation in America is the debt itself. It's a cloud over our economy. We've got to do more about it. There's one more thing I would mention, and that's tax simplification and tax alteration, not to get necessarily less taxes, but to create the tax revenue that the government takes in a way that does not damage the economy. Create a tax simplification plan that would encourage economic growth and prosperity and not pull down economic growth and prosperity. So once we've done those things, we begin to focus on reducing our surging debt. And if we do it steadfastly, like governors all over America are doing, Governor Bentley in Alabama, he's having to face challenges and he's making tough decisions, but the state's still operating. It hadn't sucked into the ocean. Neither has New Jersey. Neither has other states. Even New York and others are beginning to confront their debt situation and make tough choices. We're not doing it here. Our president is proposing more spending, not just this $324 billion plan. He's proposing to spend 10% more on the Education Department next year, 10% more on the Department of Anti-Energy, 10% more for the State Department, at a time when the country is in its most severe debt crisis in its history. That's not responsible. This debt is a threat to us. You talk to the financial experts and the wizards who move money around the world, they're worried about it. You talk to government experts like the Secretary of Treasury or the Federal Reserve Chairman or the head of the Congressional Budget Office. They tell us this is dangerous what we're doing. We're on an unsustainable path. And I do not see in this speech today any commitment, any leadership from the President on this fundamental issue. And the most fundamental failure of his leadership is not to look the American people in the eye and to tell them honestly and truthfully that we are spending too much. Back in Marion, Alabama, I was at a town meeting, actually it was a meeting at somebody's house, and 30 or 40 people there, and the oldest gentleman there spoke last. He fought in World War II. He grew up during the Depression, and he told us, in his view, it was not the high cost of living that was getting us in trouble, but the cost of living too high. And I do believe we've been living too high. We've been spending too much. And the President, our leader, should be talking directly and honestly to us and laying out a 2, 5, 10-year plan that will bring this deficit down, explain to the American people why we all are going to have to tighten our belts, why there's nothing, defense or anything else that's going to avoid having to tighten its belt. And we can do this and put our country on a sound path without having a debt crisis that would be a tragedy of monumental proportions. So, Madam President, I just wanted to share those thoughts today. This Congress is going to have to do more than tread water for the next year. We're going to have to do more than just play clever political games. We're going to have to deal with the threat we face honestly and directly. And the proposal I see that was floated again today from the White House may sound good politically, but for me, as one who's been looking at the numbers, it does one thing. It increases the debt over the next year or two by $479 billion. That means probably this year's deficit will not be $1 trillion, but probably $1.35 trillion, $1,350 billion, this year's deficit. And we're promised that there'll be a tax increase that after 10 years somehow will pay for this. That's the kind of thinking and action that has allowed this country to get out of control financially. And I hope we can do better. Thank the Chair and would yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Senator from West Virginia.
I rise today to mark a truly important day for my state and indeed this entire nation. December 6th is National Miners Day, a time when we stop to honor our nation's coal miners and remember those who have done so much to make this country what we are today. These brave men and women work every day to meet the challenge of keeping our great nation free and strong. And although the history of mining has been marked by hardship and tragedy, the bravery of our miners has never faltered. It is so befitting that today we also learn, just this morning, of a landmark settlement of more than $200 million in one of the worst mining tragedies our state has ever faced. On April the 5th, 2010, 29 miners lost their lives in the Upper Big Branch mine, which was then owned by Massey Energy. Today, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of West Virginia, Mr. Booth Goodwin, announced an agreement with Alpha Natural Resources, the company that purchased the Massey mines. This comprehensive and forward-looking settlement takes the right steps to truly protect our miners by investing more than $120 million of this settlement in mine safety, including improvements to existing mines, a new West Virginia safety training facility, and a research trust. This agreement demonstrates that the government and the company are serious about creating a true legacy of mine safety. While nothing can ever replace the beloved miners that we lost that terrible day, today's agreement shows that we all have zero tolerance for anything corporations do or don't do that leads to a mine fatality. As I've always said, at the heart of this tragedy is a simple fact that we must do everything in our power to never, ever allow any worker to be in a position where this could happen to them or their family, especially since today is National Miners Day. My thoughts and prayers are with the families of the 29 miners who died at Upper Big Branch, and I want to assure the families that the loss of their loved ones will not be in vain. Every worker should know that when they kiss their children goodbye in the morning, that they will return home at the end of that shift or at the end of the day to kiss them goodnight. I thank U.S. Attorney Goodwin and his entire team for their skill and dedication in negotiating this settlement that focuses on safety and training in the future. I also thank Alpha Natural Resources for rising to this occasion and meeting these terms. Even though Alpha did not own the Upper Big Branch mine at the time of the disaster, I applaud the company for taking responsibility for both the mistakes that were made and for investing in the future of mining to help prevent another tragedy like this from ever taking place. I encourage them and all our mining companies to continue to take steps to protect our miners. In addition, I am pleased that this agreement does not impede the families from pursuing additional civil remedies and does not prevent the authorities from prosecuting individuals whose action may warrant criminal charges. There should be no immunity for anyone who is determined to be responsible in any way for the tragedy at Upper Big Branch. April the 5th, 2010 was one of our state's most heartbreaking days. I hope and pray that we will never again endure a tragedy like the Upper Big Branch deaths, and I will work every day to make sure that we don't. Also today, we remember the 104th anniversary of the Monongah mine tragedy, which is our nation's worst mining tragedy, one that took 362 brave souls that we could account for, and it's been told that many more were lost in that horrible tragedy. So on this day, it is fitting to pay our respects and show appreciation for the miners of yesterday and today. We need to recognize the contribution of past miners who have led us to where we are now, and today's miners who keep traveling deep into the darkness to provide millions of Americans with electricity that powers our lives and the steel with which we build our nation. Without these men and women, our world will look very different. They are the true backbone of our country. Our miners extracted the coal that powered the military ships in World War I and World War II, and every conflict since. Coal provided the steel to make our country the greatest industrial power in the world, ushering in prosperity that built our infrastructure and developed a quality of life that became and is still the envy of the world. Coal provides nearly half of electricity in our country, and every day millions of homes, they're warm, they're safe, and full of light thanks to the coal. Think for a moment. Try to imagine our country if we had not had coal. It's almost inconceivable. Coal is mined all over this great nation. I thank all the men and women everywhere who work in this industry. But I can speak personally about our brave and hardworking miners in West Virginia. The miners of West Virginia and their families are the heart and soul of the Mountain State and truly an inspiration for me. Extracting minerals from the earth is not for the faint of heart. The work requires engineering brilliance, nerves of steel, and fearless dedication. West Virginia coal miners continue to set the bar for productivity, quality, and innovation. Their work ethic is second to none. Coal miners are not looking for a handout, never have. All they want is a work permit so they can go to work, earn a good wage, and provide for their families. And coal miners are much more than just the work that they do. They are some of the most loyal, brave, trusted, and patriotic folks that you could ever meet. Like their fellow West Virginians, these folks can shake your hand, look into your eyes, and touch your heart. Our coal miners love their families, they love the outdoors, their communities, and their state. These miners work hard every shift. But if they get home and find a person in need, their day just begins again. If you are hungry, they will feed you. If you are lost, they will not only give you the correct directions, they'll say, oh, heck, just follow me, and I'll take you there. It's just the kind of people that they are, and that really who we are in West Virginia. And it makes me proud to be a West Virginian and have the honor of representing them. I will continue to tell our state story when it comes to coal. And I will constantly work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to develop technology that allows us to continue to use American coal to help achieve energy independence for our great country, which will ensure our national security and grow our economy. The simple fact is this: this country needs coal, and our coal miners are still willing to do the job. So today it is my privilege to say thank you. Thank you for the job that our brave coal miners perform. This nation was built on the backs of our coal miners, and all of us should thank them, not only today, but every day of this year and every year to come. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor, and I notice the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka. Senator from Colorado.
Madam President, I'd ask unanimous consent the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Madam President, I came to the floor to speak today about Richard Cordray's nomination to lead the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but I wanted to acknowledge the remarks of Senator Manchin as well. We have coal miners in my great state of Colorado. They're particularly located in the northwestern section of our state. They're hardworking, they're patriotic. We have some of the cleanest coal in the world that's used all over our country and exported to many countries around the world. And I want to thank him for his remarks and for drawing attention to their accomplishments and to their contributions to America. Madam President, as I mentioned, I wanted to come to the floor and put a word in for Richard Cordray, who's been nominated to lead the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is otherwise known as the CFPB. Nearly 2 months ago, I urged our leaders to prioritize a vote on the nominee because without a director of the CFPB, there's important consumer protection work that's being left undone. It's work that would benefit hardworking Coloradans, those citizens of New Hampshire, and families all across our nation. So I want to begin my remarks by thanking both the Majority Leader and the Republican Leader for moving to this important nomination. After having done that, I want to turn and speak directly to Coloradans and any other Americans who may be listening today. You know, we get up here as senators and we'll talk about this agency or that agency, and in all frankly, at times it sounds like an alphabet soup. But this agency is not just another alphabet agency. The CFPB may be one of the most important federal agencies that we have, and it should be allowed to open its doors fully and begin the important work of protecting our consumers. The CFPB was created in the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act to protect American consumers from predatory and unfair financial practices. It was chartered to prevent the same kinds of abuses that banks and other large financial firms engaged in as they drove our economy into the ditch just a few short years ago. When we look back at the financial collapse in 2008, many of us still can't believe that the largest banks and financial institutions in our country were able to put our economy at such risk. And as drastic measures had to be taken and billions of dollars invested in these firms, it certainly didn't seem fair that banks and other financial institutions should get taxpayer help after having taken advantage of the good intentions of American consumers and, as a result, tanking our economy. But the truth is we were forced to act here in the Congress, or even worse financial troubles awaited us. In fact, potentially a worldwide financial depression. So that backdrop, that's really why the Congress created the CFPB, to ensure that that kind of abuse never happens again. And when we passed the Wall Street Reform Act, Congress made clear its intent to create a watchdog with the responsibility to make the financial marketplace safe for consumers. I think the presiding officer would agree that that's something that we should all want, to ensure that Americans aren't being taken advantage of by big businesses and Wall Street bankers, to ensure that someone's out looking for the little guy, to ensure that there's just slightly more of a level playing field for the Americans who play by the rules. And unfortunately, it's not. Many of our colleagues are raising a host of issues related to one central argument, that the CFPB will not be accountable to Congress and that it will go hog wild in its efforts to look out for hardworking Americans. Yes, Madam President, that's right. They argue that the CFPB will have too much power to protect consumers. I know that seems strange to hear, especially after the banking sector abuses nearly sent our economy down an irrecoverable path, and millions of Americans saw many of their investments and much of their net worth disappear overnight. But yes, some of our colleagues actually want to weaken the consumer protections that were included in the Wall Street Reform Bill, which, by the way, is the law of the land. And in order to make sure that that happens, they've vowed to block, to filibuster, all nominees to head the CFPB, regardless of who they are. There's been blanket statements made at the front end of this effort that whoever the nominee is, that person will be blocked. It strikes me that by doing that, they think that they're going to deny the CFPB a director, and then that will erode the Bureau's effectiveness and make it easier for banks to operate without limitation. And that's precisely why we have to overcome the filibuster that's being waged against Mr. Cordray right now. Without his leadership and a strong CFPB to look out after the interests of consumers, we're going to put the financial security of hardworking American families at risk and the country's economic recovery at risk. By failing to give the CFPB a director, a confirmed director, we're actually reducing oversight of predatory lending and deceptive banking practices. These are practices that in no way help our economy and our economic recovery. Now, I don't think I'm stretching the facts in saying this. Deceptive financial practices continue to threaten Americans every day, and we can do more to ensure that these abuses are brought to an end. Let me focus on one particular area. Credit reporting agencies continue their deceptive ads on websites with misleading names such as www.freescore.com and www.freecreditscore.com that lure people into a costly credit monitoring service, and they do not offer free credit scores at all. Instead, what they do is they take your credit card number and then they begin charging you a monthly fee. It's a similar hustle that many other too-good-to-be-true websites offer. The problem is that this deceptive ad strikes at the heart of Americans' personal financial health. A person starts off by doing the responsible thing, trying to check their credit score, but the next thing they know, their credit card is being charged, and they don't have that important data tied to their credit score. So the point I'm trying to make is without a confirmed director, the CFPB has diminished power to investigate the actions of the major credit reporting agencies and pull down these kinds of deceptive ads. That just doesn't make any sense to me. It's the sort of thing that Coloradans have been asking me along these lines. When are you guys in D.C., when are you guys in the Senate are going to side with us and stop always looking out for the big banks? And in these tough economic times, we need to do all we can to block such dishonest advertisements and help empower consumers to avoid these financial traps. And the CFPB is the best way to accomplish these important goals. But it needs a director to be able to act. Now, as some watching today know, and I hope Coloradans know, the Wall Street Reform Bill contained a bipartisan provision that I authored that now requires lenders and other creditors to actually provide consumers a free credit score when their score is used to deny them credit or they're offered credit on less favorable terms. And I authored this provision because credit scores are the most important and influential measure of a consumer's credit worthiness. And as millions of Americans continue to work to repair their credit status in the wake of the nation's worst financial collapse since the Great Depression, it's my belief that the CFPB must fully implement its congressionally appointed oversight of consumer credit scores and related products to stop deceptive advertisements and other setups. So I'll say it again. In order to carry out this mission, the Senate must confirm a director to head the CFPB. The Consumers Union, Madam President, one of the leading consumer advocates in the U.S., is urging Congress to confirm Mr. Cordray so the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau can tackle other critical consumer protections like reducing the penalty fees and punitive interest rates banks can charge, requiring credit rating agencies to maintain accurate consumer credit files and investigate and fix errors reported by consumers. As an aside, Madam President, I know you've heard stories about consumers who are operating in good faith and they come to find out their credit files are not accurate and then they're penalized because of that situation. The CFPB could require credit agencies to maintain accurate files. And finally, the CFPB could police the mortgage market to stop scams against consumers and prevent the return of the toxic loans and the dangerous lending practices that led to the foreclosure crisis and ultimately the recession. I don't think I'm overstating the situation when I say there are still a slew of unsafe financial products and services in the marketplace. When consumers are lured into those traps, they then can get into a high-interest debt situation, and then that affects all of us. That affects our economic health more broadly. So the CFPB would be given the capacity to tackle these abusive and deceptive practices and then be on the lookout for the next breed of financial scams. Madam President, I'd ask unanimous consent for an additional 30 seconds.